We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the radio show discussing the honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with John Tillman, President and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. And John, this week, more problems with the that scam, the red light camera system.
That's a serious public policy issue here, not a scam. This is by the city government.
They have red light cameras?
They have the best interest of the people at heart. It's about safety and the children. How outrageous for you to call this a scam.
What about the speed cameras? Are they
the speed cameras, red light cameras? What do you think's next?
I don't know. I mean, look, this is a fascinating way to try and finance city government. It's so interesting to me because what was the previous problem was the duration of the yellow light, right? And now we have tickets that are just being issued, for example, around parks after the parks were closed.
But I think it's important to talk about the duration of the yellow light because it does relate to the speed cameras. The yellow lights, the data shows that the longer the yellow light, the safer the intersection for the people. What they did is shorten the cycle of the yellow light to catch more people and increase danger to people. And now we move on to speed cameras.
Well, I guess that's why I call it a scam, because it seems to me like it's government allied against the interests of its constituents. And this is, I guess you can only fleece people through the front door to such an extent, and then you have to kind of creatively do it through the back door in the guise of children's safety and the like, right?
Well, what happens is government becomes so loyal to its self-perpetuation and expansion of its privileges and perks that it begins to see the people merely as animals to be harvested for revenue. And if ever there was a program that demonstrated this, it's this program.
Well, and Chicago Tribune reporter David Kidwell has been on this story. He found more than $2.4 million in fines that were improperly issued to Chicago drivers, ticketing them when cameras were supposed to be off and when the required warning signs were confusing, obscured, or missing. And David Kidwell from the Tribune joins us now. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
So what is with the systemic problems with the red light and speed cameras? As Tillman and I were just talking about, first it's the duration of the yellow lights. Now it's just straight up issuing tickets when you're not supposed to be issuing tickets.
Yeah, well, that's a question we'd like to have answered. We've been trying for many years to get the mayor's correspondence and his emails and all the internal memos that would explain to us what's really behind all of this. And he has not been forthcoming. That's why we have currently sued him for all of those records. $2.4 million. You're right. We did find $2.4 million in bad parks tickets, but that's just
a fraction.
The tip. That's the tip of a much, much more pervasive problem. We also reported that we did a random sample analysis at schools tickets, and we found that there's probably more than $4 million in tickets there that they should have never issued there because there's no evidence of children, the required evidence of children in the photographs.
I have a theory that the reason you haven't gotten any of those documents is because explicit in those documents will be how to generate revenue to cover the budget crisis, and they don't want that revealed, that this is all about money. It's not about safety, and I think that your great work and what it's revealed is the truth of that. And so we know that that's the truth because the evidence shows us that, and they're not going to give you the smoking gun, and that's why they're probably running the shredders right now.
Yeah, well, there does seem to be a growing body of evidence that they are either unwilling or not capable of running a fair automated enforcement program in the city, whether it's red lights or speed cameras. They keep arguing the safety thing, and there isn't enough evidence yet to know whether or not the speed cameras are making things safer. But even if they are, that does not preclude the city from following the law on their enforcement.
Well, now wait a second. The Emanuel administration said that it's going to refund nearly 23,000 tickets. City Hall admitted that should never have been mailed in the first place. So a mistake was made. They've corrected their mistake. That's the end of the story.
Yeah, they corrected their mistake after they got caught. They quietly started moving to refund those tickets after we started asking questions about all of these bogus parks tickets. So I don't, they would like to take credit for that. I will leave it up to your listeners to decide whether to give that to them.
And one point on that too, if you get a ticket that you shouldn't have gotten, you will often hear politicians say, "Well, there's this adjudicative process," but how onerous that process is to challenge a ticket makes it almost irrational to try and, in the proverbial sense, fight City Hall.
Yeah, the price point on these tickets, $100, is ingenious, because by the time you take off work and park your car and the 2 hours you have to stand in line, people make that calculation in their head, and they think, so they just write the checks.
David, I was thinking before we came on the air that this is a little like the game Frogger. You're a citizen in the city of Chicago, and the city keeps erecting all these barriers that make it harder and harder for you to get from your side of the street to your job on the other side of the street or across town. They create all these barriers and these frictions, and they try to make you run the ATM card every time you try to just go to work. Meanwhile, they can't seem to focus energy and resources on trying to reduce the violence that's going on in the city of Chicago, properly police the areas of the city where children are getting shot on the streets. It really is an extraordinary misallocation of focus and thinking, all because they cannot face the reforms they need in their budget.
We have a story online today that's going to be running in the paper on Sunday that points up the fact that the top 15 earning cameras in the city, there has never, going back to as far as we have records, been a child hit by a speeder on any of those stretches of roads. Yep. $35 million in fines.
And I wonder how many have died from other causes, such as gang violence.
Yeah, that's, those rear view mirror cameras in people's cars are probably more effective at
right.
at saving children hit by cars.
And I remember during the mayoral election, not that this had anything to do with Rahm's reelection. Please don't suggest I'm making this connection.
We're discussing a statesman, Dan.
He took down some of the cameras. Took down some of the cameras because of their improper functioning or whatever the rationale was. Not all of them, but some of them. It was interesting, some of the neighborhoods that he took them down in as well, some of the minority neighborhoods, while he's trying to ramp up his numbers in those neighborhoods. So what about that? Where did those cameras end up going or not going? And if they don't belong in those neighborhoods, why do they belong in any neighborhood?
Well, it's important to understand the history of that. He took those cameras down in the middle of a hotly contested mayoral election, when we were writing stories about the corruption and the mismanagement in that program. The red light camera program, there were nearly 400 cameras put up throughout the city in places the city to this day cannot explain why they got put there. And they were put there by a guy who's now been charged with taking $1,500 bribe for every camera that he put into the city. And so we were writing those stories, and that's when the mayor, in the middle of a mayoral campaign, decided to take down some cameras. And now we're still the largest red light camera program in the country, of 300 cameras. And they still have not addressed the fact that nearly half of those cameras, 40%, are probably making the streets more dangerous because they do not reduce the right angle crashes, and they increase rear enders because people are stopping short at these short yellow lights. So they have not yet addressed that. They said they would a year ago, and they have not yet done that.
David, what I think is so interesting about this in the larger sense is the cynicism that this shows about the political class, about the population in general, and how it treats it. They know that they can manipulate because they control information. They know that people have to live their lives, go back to trying to make a living, get to work, take care of their children, and they quit paying attention. And it's great that you're paying attention. But what do you think this says about the larger relationship between government and the national narrative? And I certainly think this is part of that national narrative, being out of control and out of touch with the very people it supposedly cares about.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm an investigative political reporter. I am not a traffic safety expert. I don't want to cover cameras. I cover the government, and the Tribune hires me to ferret out when they're not being honest and when they're hold them accountable. And I've said from the beginning that this is a story that's less about traffic safety than it is about how our government and our mayor treats the people he claims to be serving. And that's what this story is about. It's just another example of that. And I encourage people to read it and take that away from it more than whether or not they like these safety cameras.
All right, David Kidwell from the Chicago Tribune. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.